Captain Forest here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going over both these combatants to see who would win, more often than not, in a cross-verse situation. Meliodas from the 7 Deadly Sins versus Asta from Black Clover. Now, if you guys are new to my channel, please feel free to leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe for further content. Also, just a couple of shoutouts. Shoutouts to Broku, some of the stuff that I used for the analysis in terms of like the AP and speed. That was all from him, much appreciate to him. And also shouts to Nardic, he was also a huge help with the Asta section as well, giving me some pointers and looking out for some stuff. So shoutouts to him. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead, get right into meat potato things. I'm going to talk about Meliodas, and then after I've finished talking about Meliodas, I'm going to move on and talk about Asta to see what he brings to the table. Now, in order to determine where Meliodas would scale, we must go over some feats for him. So base Meliodas can hurt Gil Thunder, who can casually create a thunderstorm, which can range around the city level ranges of attack potency. Sealed Meliodas, after activating his demon mark, was able to completely embarrass and one-shot Bon. Another feat for Meliodas comes from the time when he was able to damage a Albion. An Albion has the power level of 5,500 and can casually backhand a hilltop, which is calced around the 76 megatons, aka city level. Galen's power is 26,000, making him 4 times more powerful than an Albion. Meliodas can casually beat an Albion, and this same Meliodas, while suppressed, does battle with Galen and is able to hurt him. This would put Meliodas around the 319 megatons of attack potency, aka mountain level. This is consistent as Galen's casual attacks are compared to taking on a mountain. Meliodas in his fights with Galen gets badly injured due to him trying to suppress his demonic powers, but as Meliodas has his powers unsealed, making Meliodas far stronger than his previous self in comparison to his last encounter, going from getting casually smacked around by Galen to now casually violating Galen in combat. Keep in mind, folks, this very same Meliodas is still weaker and not even at full power. Meliodas would also downscale from Escanor during that time period due to the training Meliodas underwent. Escanor fought against Galen. Galen himself uses critical strike, which amps your already established power level with an additional 14,000 increase, and Escanor endured and no-sold the strike whilst becoming far more powerful due to his grace, further power cliffing Galen. The power behind Escanor literally made Galen run off the block and get negged by his own commandment. This increase of attack potency would put Escanor and Meliodas to the 14.33 gigatons of TNT, aka island level ranges of attack power. Now, we all know about the feat with Meliodas, where he literally rages out and causes the complete destruction of Danafor. This feat was calced around the 43.40 gigatons to the 1.76 teraton levels, aka large island to small country levels of attack potency. Meliodas is able to hurt and slice off a weakened Droll's arm and also casually destroy Gloximia's armor. Meliodas also tanks a huge blast from Gloximia's spirit spear, Bascus, and comes charging back towards Gloximia. Even after Droll is healed by Gloximia, Meliodas makes quick works of both these two. Meliodas is confronted by the rest of the 10 commandments. Meliodas, despite being outnumbered, fared quite decently against them. He is able to fight them off and endure their attacks and store their attacks ready to perform a revenge counter, which is 30 times more powerful than the one he used against Hendrickson, which would put Meliodas around the 52.8 teraton range, aka country levels of attack potency. There is a statement where Meliodas was fit to be the next Demon King due to how vast and powerful Meliodas was. Even the important goddess, more than likely referring to the 4 archangels, kept their distance from Meliodas. If we take this statement seriously, this is also backed up later on in 7 Deadly Sins as Meliodas and the rest of the 7 Deadly Sin go on to fight and defeat the Demon King. This would mean that Meliodas scales above the 4 archangels, including the likes of Tarmiel and Sariel, who performed a combination attack on Estarossa, who was amped by another commandment. This was calced around the low ends of island, small country, to the higher ranges of large country to borderline multi-continental. Now let's rewind for a moment, folks, before we get ahead of ourselves. Back to the fight. So, Meliodas unfortunately comes up short as his revenge counter was completely intercepted by Estarossa, who then kills Meliodas by stabbing his 7 hearts. Meliodas, after dying, ends up in purgatory. Meliodas has type 4 immortality, as Meliodas will always come back eventually after death. When he resurrects, he becomes far stronger than before, but the Demon King draws away some of Meliodas' emotions every time, which eats away at Meliodas' humanity. Escanor himself fights against Estarossa and was able to endure and takes a full counter from Estarossa's attack, which reflects the attack back at the opponent with more than double the force, and in this case this would mean the attack would inflict 3 times as a safe end, and Escanor himself has shown to damage Estarossa with Cruel Sun and Pride Flare Explosion. Escanor would scale to Meliodas easily. Now this is all very important for Meliodas because Meliodas becomes Assault Mode Meliodas after he taps into more of his demonic self and more of his power, which cause him to revert to his old evil persona. Escanor goes in to fight Meliodas in order to snap him out of it. Meliodas begins to pick apart Escanor in their fight and mock him. Escanor gains a further increase in strength via his Grey Sunshine, which raises his power level to 114,000, and this same Assault Mode Meliodas tanks Escanor's attacks and then casually punches Escanor in the gut. Now let's do some maths real quick. So Escanor, from his fight with Galen, raised his power level up to the 55,000 ranges as he casually no-sold and took an attack from Galen's critical over, and the Escanor that Meliodas fought is double that, if not more than double in power. And adding on to the fact that Escanor can take a full counter on top of his own attack, so 52.8 times 5 or 6 if we include more than double the increase, making it triple, would equate to 264 or 316 teratons, putting both Escanor and Meliodas around the large country ranges of attack potency. Later, throughout the series, Meliodas then goes on to show he is vastly above both Saldris and Estarossa in power. He is casually able to press them both with Dark Purgatory Fire. In fact, going back to the point about the 4 Archangels, Saldris supports Estarossa's statement from before, confirming that Meliodas is above even the 4 Archangels, meaning that Meliodas would upscale and be vastly above them. So this would mean that Meliodas would one-shot them with no difficulty, and the quantification to one-shot someone would require at least 7.5 times that power. This would skyrocket Meliodas past the 4.435 petatons, putting Meliodas around the 33.262 exaton range, aka moon level. Another thing I want to also include is that the Demon Mark amplifies your stats by 2, and we see in the series that Meliodas has 3 types of Demon Mark amps, which each increase the Demon Mark further, increasing his power from the last. So in this case, with Assault Mode and the other 2 Curse Mark amps that I mentioned previously, if we also apply the 6 times multiplier to Meliodas, this means that Meliodas would be around the 199.575 exatons, aka moon level, but higher into the tier of moon. With the assistance of the 7 deadly sins combined, they were able to finally defeat the Demon King. This is impressive considering the fact that the Demon King himself used his own power to create his demon world. In this context, I'm also referring to planets. There is also a statement where the world had to get rid of Meliodas due to how much of a threat he was to the planet. So depending on your interpretation, this can easily be used to get Meliodas around the small planetary or full-on planetary level at the lowest. So Meliodas would be around the 433 exatons to the 5.44 zetatons, aka small planet or planetary on the dot. So that's going to round up attack potency. I'm going to go ahead and move on to speed. Meliodas was able to tag Estarossa and Saldris when they both tried to blitz Meliodas and failed miserably. Escanor himself can react to Saldris while he was using Omnius Nebula, and was also able to tag Saldris with that velocity of speed. The speed behind the vortex moves at 25 times the speed of light, and Meliodas casually smites both Estarossa and Saldris. And as mentioned before, with the Demon Mark multiplier, this would put Meliodas 150 times the speed of light, aka massively faster than light. We can also get Meliodas far higher and far faster into these tiers, or maybe even higher. So Meliodas has his own feat in base where he blitzes towards Arthur. Meliodas did this in base with no Demon Mark amp, and this was calced around the 53.1 times the speed of light. And if we include the 6 times multiplier, this would put Meliodas at 318.6 times the speed of light, aka massively faster than light, which is pretty impressive. So that's going to round up Meliodas' stats. I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of his abilities. So Meliodas can tap into his demon powers, which acts as a berserker rage, making him more violent and dangerous in combat. When Meliodas taps into more of his power, he undergoes a transformation called Assault Mode. He can create dark constructs with his demon powers, such as a giant axe, claws, wings for flight, dark pillars to seal you inside, and dark tendrils. Meliodas can use Hellblaze, a unique demonic attack which the fire sticks to whatever comes into contact with. The flames cannot be put out. This magical fire also negates type 3 mortality, also aka regeneration, as Bon, who has one of the best healing factors in 7 Deadly Sins, was left with a permanent scar that did not heal after Meliodas sliced him with purgatory fire. He can use Hellblaze in many ways, such as throwing a concussive or widespread explosive flame. He can lace his demonic fire around himself, weapons, etc., and he can throw down his fire to pin his foes on the ground until they burn away and die. Meliodas can compress and control dark orbs, where he spins them around at such speeds to shred through his opponent or use as a defensive option. So I'm going to go ahead and move on, and we're going to talk about Lost Vein, which is one of Meliodas' go-to weapons in combat. Now, Lost Vein is Meliodas' sacred treasure. The sword allows him to create clones which can offer support in battle. With the sword, Meliodas can perform his signature move called Full Counter, an ability that allows him to reflect magical attacks back at his opponent. His clones can also perform this technique too. Meliodas can perform Revenge Counter, where he lowers his durability to take on more damage from his opponents. Then he stockpiles all the damage and returns it all back into one massive energy attack at his foes. Meliodas can use Counter Vanish, which nullifies any magical attack, and Meliodas can utilize some impressive techniques and versatility with his sword. He can lace his sword with purgatory fire and slash his sword down, blasting purgatory fire down. It has long range and covers the area. He can perform the 1000 Divine Cuts, where he slashes opponents with quick succession. Moving on to resistances, Meliodas was able to put up a fight and resist his soul from being yanked from his body by Melascula. In fact, it required Melascula to use and invoke more potency and use a more stronger spell in order to take his soul out of his body. Very impressive. So his soul resistance is more impressive than like normal, because Melascula, like, she's able to just casually take out souls from like random fodder characters without having to use like powerful incantations. She can do it casually, but with Meliodas she actually started struggling. She had to invoke on some more power. Meliodas can regenerate from injuries. He can reattach his severed limbs. Meliodas is able to resist sealing, such as breaking out of Melascula's dark cocoon. He's also endured being forced to mentally live out several decades instantly. Meliodas is able to survive inside Purgatory, which is a realm that affects the mind, body and soul. It also ages you rapidly, and Meliodas is just fine inside this realm, giving him type 1 immortality. So that's going to round up Meliodas. I'm going to go ahead, move on, and talk about Asta himself to see what he brings to the table. Okay, so in order to determine where Asta would scale in terms of attack potency, we must address some feats, calcs, context, and all that good stuff. Now we need to talk about the Spirit Salamander. There is a guidebook statement from the Black Clover guidebook stating that a blow from its claws can bring the sea to dry out. Now the typical calc that is brought up to dry up a sea or completely vaporize a sea would pretty much have different ranges depending on the sizes of the seas and the size of the oceans. So in order to do such a feat, it would require anywhere from 11.46 to 176.14 to 450 to 829 petatons, aka multi-continental plus levels of attack potency. Now if we include the 1000 re, then this feat skyrockets to borderline moon level, which is pretty crazy, and the number pretty much rounds up around the 20.11 exatons, which means that the Spirit Salamander is outputting at least multi-continental or to multi-continental plus ranges of attack potency very high into the tier. Now, why is this all impressive and important? Well folks, this is because Asta himself was able to damage the Spirit Salamander, which means Asta right off the bat would scale to this level of power. Asta himself was able to endure the flames from the Salamander too until he was healed. A very important enemy called Lados was able to absorb the Spirit Salamander's power. He was not only absorbing its power, but he completely surpassed it altogether, becoming far more powerful. Asta was no match for that level of power that Lados adopted. However, the demonic power within Asta would also awaken with the help of the witch. He would take on a black demon form and would blitz towards and through Lados' attack to then proceed to one-shot Lados. In chapter 327 to 328, Asta uses Devil Union, but at this time he notes that he feels like he's merged with Libe instead of overlapping. This increase in power makes it to the point where he is able to completely go from getting slammed by Lucifero to now casually blocking, no-selling attacks, and physically bullying Lucifero, with Asta in the end defeating Lucifero. This is very important for Asta because Lucifero himself has statements of him going to destroy the planet, and Lucifero is far above the likes of Dorothy and Reeve. Both Dorothy and Reeve created moons during their battle. At first, it seems contentious whether or not the moons that were created were actual moons. However, dream magic is used to manifest thoughts into reality. Sally confirms herself that whatever is manifested through a person's thoughts actually creates the real thing. So essentially, both Dorothy and Reeve created a moon. Reeve being one of the apostles of Saphira, with Lich being the leader and the strongest out of them all, was unable to defeat Segrid due to Segrid being more powerful, even with the help of the first Wizard King. Later on throughout the series, after the time skip, Segrid gets completely power crept due to more powerful foes and better scaling, such as the leader of the Dark Triad called Dante, who is in his fight with Black Diviner Asta, goes on to completely embarrass Asta, showcasing the power gap difference between Dante and Segrid. Like the other members of the Dark Triad, it's later shown that they are able to tap into higher percentages of their demonic powers and reach 100%. Megecula takes the bodies of 100 dead Dark Disciples and amps them with her power, making them far stronger than the baseline level of a Supreme Devil. Since she can split her powers into all these Dark Disciples, which makes them all stronger than a 100% Dark Triad, if we do the maths, this would make Megecula 100 times stronger than a 100% Dante. So if you do 100 times 100, this equates to 10,000. This means that Megecula is 10,000 times stronger than Reeve, who can create moons. Despite this impressive level of scaling for Megecula, she is still inferior to Lucifero due to her lower placement in the Tree of Clefort, and Asta scales to all of this, putting him in the planetary ranges of attack power. Lastly, there is still some higher scaling that can be used to bump up Asta even further, folks. Lucifero's heart would be consumed by Lucius, and Lucius would go on to absorb half of Lucifero's power. Lucius would enter inside the underworld and defeat Lucifero in his own realm. Lucius would then consume the other half of Lucifero's power. This would make Lucius's base form 4 times stronger than the Lucifero that Asta faced, as Lucius would have double the physical and magical power. Asta would do battle with base Lucius. Asta would only use a partial amount of his power in Devil Union, and this was enough to counteract Lucius's attacks. And Asta, while in this form, was able to physically hit back and push back Lucius, which is very impressive. But unfortunately, as for Asta, he gets completely one-shotted by Lucius after Lucius transforms into his angelic paladin state. Asta would get teleported to the land of the sun, where he would meet the members of the Ryuzen 7. Asta would undergo further training, learning how to use a technique called Zetten, which is used to augment your chi attacks or anti-magic attacks to increase the power behind your attacks by 100. Zetten is used and distributed in different ways, either through a single attack or spreading it out in strings of other attacks. Asta is able to use it in one attack. Overall, partial Devil Union Asta would scale above Lucifero by 4 times, then you multiply it by 100 with the Zetten increase. You're looking around 6 utatons, which equates to large planet level. Now that's going to round up attack potency. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to speed. Now, how speed works in Black Clover is quite interesting. The more mana a mage has, the faster they become. For example, if a mage was to become 10 times stronger, that means they also become 10 times faster. There are a lot of light speed feats in Black Clover, so let's go over some of these feats. Meliodas has a feat where she is able to react and intercept a light attack. This has different calc ranges from around the 28 to 47 to 95 times the speed of light, aka FTL+. Base Asta himself is fast enough to outpace the fire attacks and was able to tag Raya before her fire magic could touch him. So base Asta currently would scale to that, which is pretty impressive. Now Magna, during a short period of time, was above Black Asta. Black Asta had difficulty dealing with a spider, whilst other combatants such as Leopold and Magna, would perform better against other creatures, such as Leopold defeating the spider, becoming stronger, and Magna battling against a giant magic golem. Leopold struggles against the golems in comparison to Magna, who can one-shot these golems, and was also able to outright blitz them. Later on, Magna gains a 25 times increase. This took place during the time they were all trying to find a cure for Asta's arms. In the search for a cure, Magna and Luck went into the dungeons and ended up fighting creatures and getting stronger. It's even confirmed in a light novel that both Luck and Magna retained their increase in stats. So essentially, Magna is 25 times stronger and faster, as well as being above Black Asta at the time. So if we do the math, which would be 28 times 25, this would equate to 70 times the speed of light, or 47 times 25, which would equate to 1175, or if we do 95 times 25, this equates to 2375 times the speed of light, aka massively faster than light. Plus, during the Spade arc, during the Dante versus Magna fight, Magna is compared to be at least 500 times weaker than Dante, which means that Dante is 500 times faster than Magna. So depending on what values and ranges of speed you use, Dante would essentially range around the 350,000 to the 587,500 to the higher end of 1,185,500 times the speed of light. Asta scales to all of this, and in his Devil Union form, he is able to keep up with Lilith, who is more than twice as fast as the base form Devil Twins. This means that the Devil Union Asta in this form at this time is 700,000 to 1,175,000 to 2,371,000 times the speed of light. As mentioned in the AP department, Megicula is 100 times faster and stronger than Dante. A weaker Lucifero, who only had 50% of his power, is above Megicula. Lucifero himself more than doubles his power against Zoro's doubling trap. This puts Lucifero around the ranges of 70 million to 117,005,000 to the 237,100,000 times the speed of light. And if we include the feat where Lucius absorbed all of Lucifero's power, which grants a 4 times increase, this would put Lucius around the 280 million to the 470 million to the 948,400,000 times the speed of light, and Asta scales to all of this. Current Asta has become a lot stronger, and with the use of Zeton, if we include the Zeton increases, Asta would range around the 28 billion to the 47 billion to the 94 billion times the speed of light, aka massively faster than light plus. So this is some huge scaling in terms of speed for Asta. Very impressive. So that's going to round up Asta's speed. Let's talk about Asta's Greyamore. Unlike the other mages, Asta was not blessed by mana. He has no magic, nor can he use any. Instead, he discovered a special Greyamore like no other. This Greyamore gave Asta a giant black sword called the Demon Slayer sword, which contains anti-magic nullifying powers. Anything magic in nature that would touch the sword would be instantly nullified. Anyone with magic who tried to touch or wield the sword would have their magic drained. Asta would later obtain another sword called the Demon Dweller sword, which these swords have their own unique features, such as reflecting any magical attacks back at the opponent. Asta during the Alph Saga gains a third sword called the Demon Destroyer sword. This sword has causality manipulation, as the sword removed the cause and effect of the poison magic that couldn't be removed by normal means. After Yami was captured, he left behind his katana. Asta would then inherit the sword and add it to his arsenal, and in doing so, Asta then copied and performed Dimensional Slash, which cuts through space-time, effectively slicing through and negating the durability of anything that it cuts. By tapping into the demonic energy, Asta transforms into Black Asta. In this state, it increases his stats and grants him the ability to fly and also perform techniques with his sword, such as Black Meteor, where he flies and charges straight towards his opponents to slice them with Demon Slayer. Black Hurricane, which is a move where Asta will spin around at rapid speeds in order to slice and nullify magic that is covering the area. He can also use his Demon Slayer sword as a means of transport. Asta can recall his sword back to him. Raya a powerful magic knight who can copy people's spells, could not copy the properties of Asta's anti-magic sword and can only copy the sword's image. Asta's sword can also cut spatial magic. Asta makes up for long distance combat either by redirecting his opponent's magic attacks right back at them, or he will straight up throw his swords at his opponents like a spear. Asta can control where he deflects the magic attack with his sword. Asta can also affect spirits with his sword. When Asta stabbed Veto, the sword began to nullify and absorb all of Veto's magical abilities and magical prowess, and also nullified his precognition. Asta's sword nullifies magic inside undead corpses and stops them from reanimating, giving Asta's sword a small specific form of type 7 immortality negation. Asta's sword can nullify magical portals. Asta's anti-magic counters Lucius's time magic, and it protected him from being stuck in chronostasis. Asta's anti-magic goes against the natural laws of magic. The range of Asta's anti-magic has increased significantly, being able to nullify larger spells from far distances. Asta can also hit himself with his own anti-magic sword on his curse wounds to cancel out its effects. Asta's sword can also erase brainwashing spells. The anti-magic sword also negates type 3 immortality as it nullifies Veto's magical healing factor. This sword also negated the reincarnation spell after stabbing it into someone whose body inhabited a elf soul inside of it. Asta was also able to resist the effects of Reflect Iris, which blinds the opponent. Asta also resisted it enough to draw his sword to cancel out the spell. Now let's talk about Devil Union. After Asta and Libe accepted each other and gained Libe's power, he is able to tap into it better. When Asta finally learns how to use Devil Union, it increases his power, which lasts for about 5 to 10 minutes. Asta erases the magic from the giant demon and then proceeds to enlarge his sword and completely slice through the giant demon, completely one-shotting it, showing Asta can enlarge his swords and attack or reflect back attacks that are way bigger than Asta, which is very impressive. Asta also gets a magic knight costume, which grants him resistance to magic attacks. Asta also has some of his own unique traits. He trains hard, he has insane willpower and endurance, quick reflexes, and instinctive reaction to allow him to slice and repel magic fireball attacks. Yami teaches and tells Asta about Ki and how to use it. Ki in Black Clover is used by using all of your 5 senses and visualizing something halfway between instinctive and precognition. These are used to predict the smallest details of natural objects and people, whether it's them looking at you, the sound of their breathing, motions of their muscles, or vague senses. Asta's Ki reading informs him of your intentions and could tell that Libe was not trying to kill him. Asta can also tell if you're using precognition as well. Even when Dante was reality warping to evade Asta, Asta was still able to detect and suss out where Dante was hiding. Asta can also predict teleportation, and Asta's Ki detection works even better when the opponent's emotions are wild. His anti-magic sword is sensitive to magic and can track anyone using magic. Asta uses Ki to suss out and strike Poisot, who was using transparency magic, which makes him invisible, invulnerable, and unaffected by magic attacks as they phase through him, so he can even still precog things or people who try to dawn on invisibility or use stealth or any type of conventional means of hiding. Throughout many fights, Asta has been observing and copying different fighting styles from other combatants and using them all in combat against Libe. Even with just one arm, we see Asta react to Libe's attack and outskill him and defeats him in combat. To further add on to Asta's endurance, Asta himself has at least 2 days worth of stamina. Overall, Asta is an exceptional fighter with insane levels of grit and determination to surpass his limits and to keep getting stronger to one day become the Wizard King. Now that's going to round up both these combatants. I'm going to go ahead and see who wins more often than not in a cross-verse situation. Let's look at stats, folks. In terms of attack potency, I gotta give this to Asta. Higher quantifications into the large planetary tiers. You could make the argument for Meliodas being in any of those tiers, however, it's just a little bit too much of a gray area. It's kind of unquantifiable to see how high Meliodas would go into those tiers, so I would give that to Asta. Even if we use the multi-continental ranges, Asta has higher quantifications into that tier too, so Asta would still have the AP advantage going into this. Speed, I gotta give this to Asta. Millions, billions of times in comparison to Meliodas's paltry, few hundred times, the speed of light. Meliodas is getting blitzed. He does not have any way to compete with Asta when it comes to the speed department. So stats, gotta give this to Asta. Now, looking into things, Meliodas has some things he could use. He does have some tactics, Hellfire. He does have his demonic Hellfire. Hellfire in Seven Deadly Sins does negate your regen, so it does so any type of type 3 mortality, you know, mid-high, I believe, you're not going to really be able to regen from it. However, Asta has counters towards any of Meliodas's magical attacks. I think the huge hard counter towards Meliodas is the anti-magic stuff, the anti-magic swords, the anti-magic energy that resonates from Asta, especially if Asta incorporates Devil Union. That is going to be a huge counter. There's nothing that Meliodas can do. Trillion Darts is not going to do anything. Asta will literally just mow down through all of those darts, blitz towards Meliodas, and then just cut his head off and one-shot him. I could even make the argument that he'd be able to nullify the regen, and just due to how magic is it's kind of tailored towards these abilities and what the demons can do in the verse. So I definitely see Asta being able to nullify the regen if we make that argument. Now, what about clones? Clones aren't going to do anything. Asta would just whoop their asses too. Full counter is completely irrelevant, completely useless. Asta does not use magic in any way, shape or form. His whole point in the series is to negate magic, because he has no magic to use anyway. And plus, Asta is far more skilled in physical combat. Asta also has a wide variety of options. He could use Katana. He could completely negate Meliodas' durability with the Dimensional Slash. Asta also has precognition due to his ability to read ki. He can also use Zetan to further increase his stats. So it's just a huge stomp. I give this to Asta with pretty much no difficulty, since the stats are just way too huge, and Asta has so many ways to neutralize and take down Meliodas, so I gotta give victory to Asta. But what about equal stats, folks? Since AP and speed is no longer an issue, Meliodas would be able to contend with Asta a little bit better in combat. However, when it comes to skill, Asta has observed countless fights. He is far more skilled when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, especially when it comes to swordplay. And when it comes to the magic aspect, again, it's still not going to change the disadvantages that Meliodas has. Asta can still mow down through all of his demonic spells. Hellfire Inferno's not going to work. Any of Meliodas' tactics are just going to be completely thwarted due to Asta's anti-magic swords and energy, so he's still going to put that out of commission. So Meliodas is pretty much done for. There's just nothing he can do. Plus, if it came down to hand-to-hand combat, as mentioned, Asta has precognition. Asta would be able to read Meliodas like a book. He'll know Meliodas' intentions, so he'd just further outskill, outpredict, and completely bop Meliodas on his head. So even in equal stats, I give victory to Asta. So thank you guys for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment down below, and of course subscribe for further content. Let me know who you think wins more often than not in these situations. It's been real. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.